Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the very first episode of the Hydrated Gamers podcast. We have some really cool individuals joining me here today, all of which are Guild Wars 2 players, which is quite nice. Thank you very much for joining me on this first episode of the Hydrated Gamers podcast. To let you guys know, this is not sponsored. It's taken out of our free time and will and love of MMORPGs. So let's go ahead, and without further ado, let's get the show on the road. Thank you, everyone, for joining me here today. It's been nice to finally get everyone together because not only are we playing the same game, but we're on all different corners of the world. So different time zones, different schedules, different personal lives. But finally, we're all here. Guys, welcome to the podcast. I think a good introduction of what everyone does, where they do their content at, and how long you've actually been playing Guild Wars 2 for, and what kind of MMORPG player would be a good way to start the podcast off. So, which poor soul am I going to pick first? I'm going to go ahead and go right to my right. Bloom, why don't you start us off?
I would say I'm like a semi-casual player. I'm maybe dipping closer into the hardcore side. I tend to basically play around with every system in an MMO and then get into the raiding, and I'll keep raiding for a couple months and then dip. But Guild Wars 2 has always been the game that I come back to. I love it so much. I will find every opportunity to talk people's ears off about it. So, yeah, that's me.
Happy to have you. I think it's really nice that you are joining us here today. And it sounds like that. What kind of class are you playing as of lately? Like, what's your go-to?
Yeah.
I recently saw a new upload of yours, but I'm curious, like, what is your favorite class currently in the game?
Yeah. So I've mained Guardian for a long time, but there's too many Guardians in the game now. So I decided to disband the Guardian Legion, and I've converted over to Revenant. And Revenant is now my main. I really love Revenant. Recently did a video talking about Herald, which is my favorite spec and build at the moment. I am now a Revenant main. Yep.
Nice. Okay. All right. Noted. Guardians out there. Just beware. Bloom has left the chat, so
sorry, I'm a defector.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Brixel, I've seen your content on YouTube. Why don't you tell us, when did you start playing Guild Wars 2 and how you like the game currently? A little bit more information about you would be nice.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'm Brixel. Well, I'm Chris. I run a channel called Brixel. On the channel I've kind of dabbled on various different kind of game reviews and analysis and stuff like that. And I've always loved MMOs, and I was kind of like trying not to make MMO content because there's just so many people in the space, but I just wanted to, so I just ended up doing it. And I was playing a bunch of ESO, and that was kind of my main MMO, and I just got really sick of ESO, especially with the most recent expansion, which, if you know anything about High Isle, it's just a bit of a shit show.
No, I'm real curious, actually, on that point. Like, what's up with ESO right now, real quick? Because I've seen some discourse in comments on Reddit, but I have no idea what they're talking about.
Well, like, the big selling feature of the new expansion was a card game.
Oh,
and
interesting.
I
A
don't
lot of
want
gameplay there.
that. I don't really want that. Like, I mean,
the new end game.
I got my cards. I'm good. I got freaking tons of magic cards right here. I don't need that in my MMOs. I go to my MMOs to play MMOs. So I just kind of fell off ESO a bit. And I was like, let me stop playing Guild Wars 2 again. And I fell harder in love with that game than I have ever. And I played day one. Like, I ran after school to buy my copy. I was like 16, and I installed it that day. And I kind of fell off after launch, but so I kind of came back to Guild Wars 2 recently, and I just started making content because I love the game, and I didn't stop making content about the game, and now it's the only game I make content about. So that's me.
Nice. I wanted to kind of get different experiences of players on this podcast, And that's why I was really happy for Tom to join us as well. Not only is Tom playing the game by himself, but he also has a YouTube channel with another friend of his called Scott. So, Tom, a little quick introduction of you would be great.
Yeah, of course. I started the YouTube channel just about 5 months ago, so we're pretty new, but I am one half of a duo called BadCuzDad. Me and my buddy Scott run the channel, and we kind of cover all types of MMOs, not just Guild Wars 2, but obviously Guild Wars has a special place in my heart. I really love this game, and kind of in the way that Bloom stated it, I'm a casual, but maybe casual plus might be the way you want to put it, but I'm more towards the PvP side. I've never done a raid in Guild Wars, but I do a lot of ranked. I've done a lot of World v World, and so yeah. And the way I even got into Guild Wars 2, I started with Star Wars: The Old Republic. Was actually my very first MMO. So I've only been playing for about 10 years MMOs, and I was a console gamer, like a Halo, Madden, meathead kind of console gamer. But I love Star Wars. Watched them with my dad growing up, and when I saw that I could be like a double-bladed lightsaber user in a Star Wars game, I was like sold. Got the gaming PC and never looked back. And so, but even just in that year of playing Star Wars: The Old Republic and kind of dabbling in WoW, because I feel like it's like a rite of passage to play WoW, if you're in the MMOs. Even from just seeing the hype of build up for Guild Wars 2 over that year to into 2012 when it launched, I could see as a new player that Guild Wars was just different. And it was really cool. And I remember Colin Johansson at the time, the master of the hype train. I was like hyped out of my mind for Guild Wars 2. And so, yeah, from day one, I jumped in, and yeah, I've loved it ever since.
That's awesome. It's good to hear. And you're still playing the game casually. I mean, it does sound like you're more of the Star Wars fan. So I just want to clear the air a little bit. Are you still playing Guild Wars 2?
I play both. The bad thing is their new expansions came out at the same time, so I've been kind of hopping back and forth. I am one step away from getting the turtle mount. I still need to do the strike mission, but I've done the story. I've done all the map completions for the new maps. I'm sure we'll get into it, but obviously I was hoping more PvP content would come with End of Dragons. But yeah, I still love Guild Wars and visit it often. Still have a couple friends who play. So yeah, I'm logging in pretty regular.
Guys, we have someone who doesn't have the turtle mount in the podcast, so fake gamer here. No, I'm teasing. I'm teasing.
Unbelievable.
Come on, no, I'm teasing. To be honest with you,
I don't have it either.
oh,
Yeah.
This is why you guys are down there, and me and Bloom are up here. No, I'm teasing.
Yeah, but I fish a lot. I fish a lot. So
I don't even have the sky scale.
Really? Okay. Well, sky scale is a pain in the ass. I'm not gonna lie.
No,
it took a
just like
Fine. That's fine.
I have all of the mats I need. I just couldn't be asked. I love my Griffin.
Yeah, I mean, I've had friends that have played this game way longer than I have, like double the amount of hours, played since launch, and one of them only got the sky scale like a month ago. So
wow,
it's a pretty big investment. Yeah.
Yeah, but you don't even need to get it. Just go play Dragonflight. You don't need this.
Oh, yeah, there you go. No need, guys. It's right there. Easy. Just pay the expansion. You're good. Blizzard has you set up.
There you go.
I did want to share a little bit about when I started playing the game, because I can relate actually to Tom's experience with MMORPGs. Seeing a Star Wars game out there. I grew up with three brothers in my household, so we were always swinging, plastic lightsabers at each other and chopping each other's arms off. But I had the choice between Star Wars or Guild Wars, and my mother said, it's a subscription-based game. There's no way we're going to let you play this. So, I ended up playing Guild Wars at launch, and actually during the betas in 2012. And I don't know if you guys have seen the trailers back in the day where they showed all the skills of all the classes. But as soon as I saw a thief hop off of like this rooftop and she unloads like double pistols in slow motion, I was instant. I was like, I called my friend up. I'm like, I'm going to roll thief. And like, that's it. No questions asked. So
that exact shot is seared into my brain of the redheaded Norn with the...
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And that's what I've been playing. Now, of course, when you're playing Guild Wars, they make it so easy to try out all the different professions that are out there. But yeah, I'm definitely a thief boy at heart, and it's actually what I've played all of the expansions and story with. So we had a little pre-talk before we started the live stream, and I did want to ask where everyone is in terms of the story. So if there is any spoilers or anything, we don't want to jump into that. Obviously, Brixel just killed Zaitan like just the other day, so congrats, Brixel. We're really proud.
I killed Zaitan
Yeah,
2015.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right.
I finished End of Dragons this morning.
And
Yeah,
you enjoyed it. You enjoyed End of Dragons.
it was I'm not proud enough to deny that I cried at the end.
Yep, fair. I
With,
also cried at the end.
With
it was good.
Kaz and Jory's engagement at the end, just dead ass. I was crying. It was really beautiful. I loved it. I really loved it.
Yeah.
Bloom, you shed
for me. Yeah. I mean, I cried because you know the final instance where you're fighting all the dragons. I was just like, I had that feeling that I had when I watched Avengers Endgame for the first time, where you know they have the scene where all the Avengers line up, and I was crying throughout the entire scene because it was so epic. There were so many years behind it, and it was the same with End of Dragons, where that entire final instance, I was just like, my tears were welling in my eyes because it was so epic. You were like jumping from platform to platform. You were saving your friends, and like the iconic music of every dragon would play when you were fighting them, and you'd jump over to the next one. It was just so epic. I love that final instance so much. It was awesome. Yeah.
It was so good. It was so good. I can't wait to actually do all the strikes now. I'm really looking forward to it.
Yes.
I have to confess. So, Tom, and Brixel, you said you don't have the turtle either. Is this correct? Or okay.
Don't have the turtle now.
So when you get the turtle, or your quest to get the turtle, you have to play. I think it's Kaineng strike mission. Correct me if I'm wrong, Bloom. I think it's Kaineng. One of the strike missions is what you have to play. I only played that strike mission, and I haven't touched any of the other strike missions afterwards.
Oh my gosh!
Yeah,
you guys are missing out.
I'm such a fake
I'm
gamer.
This entire podcast, I'm going to be preaching about the strikes. I'm going to tell everyone to do
I
them.
actually remember in one of your videos you mentioned that you'd only played the one. Well, it's like we got like almost half a strike team. Let's go.
Yeah, there we go.
Exactly.
That's true.
Episode 2.
I mean, I think that is an interesting discussion at some point as to, you know, why you play Guild Wars a lot, but maybe why you haven't dipped your toes into strikes and that sort of thing. Because I think they're awesome content, and I was so excited for them. When I was doing the End of Dragons campaign, I'd unlock the strike through the story mission, and then I'd do the story version. And then as soon as I finished the story version, my friend and I'd like put a commander tag up, and I get a bunch of people to just do the strike version because it just felt, you know, it felt right to do that. Yeah, I mean, I'd be so interested to hear why you guys haven't dived into it.
For sure. And when I did the Kaineng strike mission, like outside of the story instances, so I was doing it for the turtle. That was my incentive. I had a great time. Like, you know, there's 4 people down. You're like, oh shit, we got to really carry this fight on. And, you know, it really kept me engaged with so many mechanics going on. I had a great time. I think the biggest thing for me, though, is like the rewards. Like, I'm thinking, like, what is something I can show off in game and be like, yeah, I kicked, you know, the boss in Kaineng, the strike mission. Like, you should definitely do it sometime so you can have, I don't know, like this shoulder item in the game. Yeah. And I think because there's no shiny, I hate to be like a scrit right now, but because there's no like physical like reward, I'm kind of just like, I like the content. I think it's great, but like when I walk away with just like gold and 15-20 minutes pass, I'm like, would I do that again? Like, should I do that again? I have to get a group together kind of thing. I'm lazy. Okay, like maybe I'll do something else in the game. So I think the strikes are perfect. I just think it's a reward issue that on my end is why I don't play the strikes as much.
I think for me, my lack of strike engagement is slightly different. It's that I've played so many other MMOs that train you to get a group through a button. You push a button, you're in a group, you don't even have to talk to them. there isn't any of that in Guild Wars 2. Obviously, you've got your LFG tool, but it's there's still a little bit more of a puggy barrier to entry, and it also involves a little bit more socializing, which I know is ironic in an MMO, but it's like just that extra level of socializing. It's like, oh, maybe I don't know if I want to do this with randoms, and I always try to like think, no, what, I'll do it with friends, and I'm like, shit, I don't have 10 friends.
Yeah, I'm kind of similar. Mine's kind of like two reasons, kind of like Brixel. My friend group is really spread across different games. And so I have like one really good friend who plays Guild Wars. And so when I come back and I jump in, we usually do things together. And so I'm not in a guild or I don't have a big group of players. And the second is since I split time with MMOs, when I come back and I play Guild Wars, I really just PvP because that's what I love about Guild Wars. So I'm not a big PvE player really in any MMO that I play. But the turtle mount is something I want. So it is something that I want to do and I will do. But in the same way as a PvPer, I have a build that I play. And I don't know the PvE meta. That's a little scary to be like, okay, I need to change this, and I'm a ranger, so I need spirits now, and I need to... But maybe they're not that difficult, so builds aren't as big of a deal for the regular instances, but that's kind of the reason why I haven't really jumped into strikes as a whole, basically.
I think that's... I mean, all three of you have nailed it. Each of those points are like the three key pain points that I can see with strikes, raids, fractals, all of that. It's like, it's the lack of matchmaking that most other MMOs have. So you've got to do the LFG, and you either have to build up the confidence to join someone yourself, or
That's
you
scary
spend
sometimes.
300 gold. It is very scary. I mean, like when someone has a slot and it just says looking for 1 DPS, you're like, shit, am I good enough
that
to be that
DPS?
1 DPS? Like, you know, it's scary. And then the other thing is, if you don't want to join someone else, you start your own, which is great when you have a commander tag, but that costs like 300 gold, which is a lot for a new player. Yeah, and then for you, Moop, like the lack of rewards, the actual shiny, huge thing, huge deal for me, especially. The reasons I've taken a break from Guild Wars 2 to play Final Fantasy and WoW and that sort of thing is because I wanted to go back to that really familiar model of like, kill the boss. The boss has a unique drop that you put on, and you have something to show for it. And I think that is a huge pain point with Guild Wars 2 that I get quite upset by all the time, is really just like the lack of those unique mid-tier rewards to grind for. Like Final Fantasy, even old fights, you're grinding them over and over and over just to collect all the weapons and the mount skin and that sort of thing. There's just nothing similar in Guild Wars 2, which is a big shame because it's like something. I'm a very fashion-driven player. I pretty much play these games to look cool, and if a new raid releases and it either doesn't have any like new gear in it or the gear doesn't look good, I'm straight up like not interested. I'll do it once and then just never again. So 100%. And yeah.
Bloom is here for the Barbie simulator, and like that's
I
it.
am.
You know, that's where the gameplay ends for Bloom. And I can 100% relate to you though. Like, if there's not an incentive to run this content, I kind of feel a little bit more chilled back. Like, you know, Tom said he did a lot of fishing in End of Dragons, and like I can say a lot of my time went towards fishing because it's just like there's more work you have to put in. And I think the game itself, Guild Wars, is aimed at casual players, like casual MMORPG players. You don't have you have a full-time job, you have personal life, maybe you only have like 2 hours during the week to play a game, and if you hop on, you don't want to be doing job interviews for, am I actually the DPS person for this role? Like, can I actually, make this group proud of me? Like, this is a lot of work to go through. There's no queue system that makes it easy, like queuing into PvP for a strike mission. I think that would be something that's easy and quick to get into. Now, of course, you're queuing into maybe a pug group or something like that. But in situations like this, I think there needs to be a system in place that makes it just a little bit easier for players to enter it. And also, of course, an incentive. Where is that shiny? Where is the cool Barbie simulator item that will make my character a little bit more fascinating than anyone else out there.
I also just think that, like, especially if you look at I think Final Fantasy 14 does such a fantastic job of not necessarily incentivizing, but forcing you to engage in group content through the story. So every casual player has to play the trials and has to play the dungeons and like has to play the early raids, Crystal Tower and all that. You have to engage with them, and once you've done it once, you're like, oh, that wasn't as hard as I thought it would be. And
Yeah.
I never touched a raid in Final Fantasy until I back in Shadowlands. No, I always get confused with Shadowbringers, Shadowlands, all these
Yeah.
Endwalker,
Always
End of
something.
Dragons, Dragonflight.
Yeah.
Can we just like name
Yeah.
our things? But what was I saying? During I completely forgot what I was saying. I completely lost my train, and I knew this was going to happen on this podcast. It's like I'm gonna lose my train of thought at some point, and I'm gonna look like an idiot. I'm sorry.
No. You're fine. I want to throw a question at you, and then maybe actually this can bring us into our next topic. So, Brixel, let's say you are the chief executive officer at ArenaNet. Okay.
Yeah.
Your job is to primarily bring in new players and old veteran players who have picked up the game in like 2012, 2015. When did Pathfinder come out? 2017. They played it, and then they walked away from it. Like, what is your techniques into bringing in these players back into the game? What kind of content would you add? What kind of marketing would you use? Like, I'm quite curious what everyone's methodology would be if you were in this fake position.
Yeah.
Very.
I mean, there's a lot.
Oh, well,
Yeah,
me
go ahead.
personally, I'd just be like, within the first 10 levels, I'd be like, hi, this is a Defiance bar. This is how it works.
Okay.
Yeah.
I
agree.
But for real, new player experience, number one, most important thing in the game. If I was in charge of anything at ArenaNet, I would not be making new content until I knew that the people who are going to be flooding in for the Steam release have something to play and something good to play. Just my primary thing would just be completely reworking the new player experience, adding tutorial hearts like Xingje in all the level 1 to 10 areas. I actually had a whole thought about this, but yeah, I think mainly it would just be tutorializing content. I remember what I was saying now.
Let's go.
Yeah, it was the forcing you to do the group content point.
Tutorializing, exactly, because Final Fantasy forces you to do that content, and once you've done it, you're like, oh, it's actually not that hard, it's not that bad. And if there was a little bit of a forcing you to do some of the strike missions, or forcing you to do like the dungeons in the early game, if you actually had to do them, I think a lot of people would realize that group content's not that scary.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So that's what I would change.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing for me would just be like, I'd get everyone, I'm like, all right, ArenaNet, we're doing matchmaking and we're making people do group content. Like, yeah, I 100% agree. Like, I know that they really want to cater to all kinds of players and not force players to, do certain things to get through the story or whatever. But I 100% think a huge issue with the game for new players, and even for like veteran players like myself who just want to play the content all the time, having a complete lack of matchmaking really makes it difficult. And there's a lot of people doing the content. Like, I can tell you right now, when I start a group for strikes and I throw a commander tag up and I don't even look for specific roles, if I just go all welcome, it'll fill up literally in like 30 seconds.
Yeah.
So there's people doing it. It's just there should be some way to match everyone, especially because like they've advertised strikes as being this pathway into raids, but they're not that much easier to get into than raids. Both raids and strikes, you have to navigate the LFG. You've got to, figure out what roles you're playing and that sort of thing. Strikes, you can literally do with anyone. You don't need specific roles. You might need some healers, but I think that's part of the interesting social, doing some socializing. You'd matchmake into a group of 9 other players. You'd all smash your head against the wall and try to beat the content. And if you can't, you're gonna like talk and you're gonna be like, "Hey, all right, we need some heals. Who can do some heals?" That sort of thing. And I think that like moves towards Tom's point as well. That like you don't know what you've got to bring in terms of utility and that sort of thing until you've Googled it or whatever. And I think having you engage in that group content more often is going to have, it's going to have people talking, and you're going to adjust your build as you go. Like you do that strike and you'd start equipping some more, like healing skills, and you're like, oh, maybe I should be a healer because, these groups, they seem to lack healers. And so you got to do that. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll touch on the group content thing first before I get into what would I change to get more players back. So I kind of have to give ArenaNet props because for me, like a PvPer, I went through the story and I did the story version of the strike mission. And honestly, that was enough for me. Like, I don't necessarily feel the need to go do the other ones because I saw the content and it was a part of the story. It was super cool. It was a little more challenging than the other stuff in the story. And I was really satisfied with that. And so for me, I don't feel a big need to move to the next step. I just want more PvP content kind of a thing. Yeah. And now that I've been really positive, I'm going to have a slightly more doomer take on this one. So I did a video about what I wanted to see kind of moving forward, and it was probably my most disliked video. So in that video, I kind of compared Guild Wars 2 to just a regular product and like a product life cycle, and Guild Wars 2 being kind of at the maturity stage. And what usually denotes a maturity stage is you're fully grown, you're making the most revenue you can, but also when you're at that stage, other companies try to come in and replicate your product, and they try to take your market share and your customers. And
Dragonflight. Sorry.
There you go. You're there.
Yeah.
And so we can see World of Warcraft has took a hard left turn, right? Account-wide everything, an inventory bag just for crafting stuff. Obviously a one-to-one almost rip-off of dragon riding.
Yep.
And so my worry in that video was, I was saying, as other games start to really steal and adopt things from Guild Wars 2, I think that leaves Guild Wars 2 in kind of a rough place. And there's going to be a lot more competition for players like me or other players who are more casual. And my answer to that in the video was, I think Guild Wars 3 is the answer. And a lot of people did not agree with me because of the amount of time they've put into Guild Wars 2, all the things they've accumulated. But I think we can agree, maybe you guys don't agree, but I think Guild Wars 2 messed up their first impression with Season 1. Like events coming and going. I remember the day the Karka event, invaded Lion's Arch, I stopped playing the game for months. I took off work to do that event, and then I was playing a slideshow, and I was like, you know what, I'm going to put this down for a while. Eventually they fixed things, but I think Guild Wars 2 needs, or Guild Wars in general, needs a second chance at a first impression. And I think that learning from the mistakes of Guild Wars 2 and putting them to a Guild Wars 3 plus, the new technology coming out. I mean, I'm looking to Ashes of Creation a little, and UE5 looks incredible. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, what would Guild Wars 3 look like on Unreal Engine 5 or something like that? So I don't know if that's doomer or if you guys disagree or agree, but I would really like them to maybe after the next expansion, we're running out of elite specs. I know, moopliss, in your video about the 4th expansion, you're like, please, no more elite specs kind of a thing. Yeah. And so... yeah, I don't know.
I agree with you there.
I mean, real quick, like I saw the other day, ArenaNet are hiring for Unreal Engine 5 developers.
Really?
Wow. Specifically, yeah. They've been very publicly having job listings for Unreal Engine 5 developers for an existing fantasy IP of theirs. Which, I mean...
that is good news.
It is it has to be Guild Wars. Whether it's an MMO or not, whether it's Guild Wars 3... we don't know, but I totally agree. The thing, like I said matchmaking or whatever, that'd be a great thing for new and returning players. But from the outside, if you're not in the game yet and you see a trailer that says Guild Wars 2 has added matchmaking, everyone's going to point and laugh and be like, why did that MMO not have matchmaking before? So 100% like expansions or new releases is always what brings in new players and gets old players coming back. I 100% agree that season 1 was a bad first impression. I think it was kind of ahead of its time. Like Destiny 2 is one of the most popular MMOs now, and its content model is essentially the Living World season 1 content model, where they do stuff in the world and then it goes away forever, and then they cycle in new content and they just keep
But it wasn't
removing the
always
old
that
content.
way.
It wasn't always. That's the thing, is Destiny 2 has kind of like flipped it. They started with the DLCs and expansions, just like a normal MMO, and then they've turned into this kind of like 3-month, like the tri-monthly content updates that get phased in and phased out. Yeah, I mean, I think Guild Wars 2 would have absolutely popped off if right after the launch, because it got very well received. It was like at launch, 10 out of 10s, 9 out of 10s. It was a fantastic, new, innovative MMORPG. If they had announced like 6 months after the game's launch they were working on an expansion and not Living World season stuff, I think that would have been really good for the game. Yeah.
I remember. Sorry, I just wanted to, on that point. Like, I remember back in like 2013, I was just hanging out in Stormwind with my WoW guild, and we were all talking about how much we loved Guild Wars 2. My whole WoW guild, we were all talking about how amazing Guild Wars 2 is and how much better a game Guild Wars 2 is than WoW.
Yeah.
But we were having this conversation in WoW. So that tells you the game didn't actually have the retention it should have had, despite the fact that it was massively like well received at launch.
Yeah, that's the most positive thing I can say about Guild Wars 2's launch, is that even though I was playing other games, anyone else that I knew that had played Guild Wars 2, their impression was that was a great MMO. Like, everyone was like, that was an excellent MMO. I don't know why I didn't stick with it, but it was a good game. And I'm like, it's still around. There are expansions now. It's still here. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That's a good point. I think everyone generally has a very positive opinion of Guild Wars 2 when they've left it, which is why I think people come back eventually, because they don't have particularly negative memories of Guild Wars 2. Like, their content model was weird, but it wasn't predatory. You didn't have to pay for it like you do with Destiny or whatever. It was just free content that they were releasing as time went on. So everyone had a very positive reception, and I wish they leaned on that.
But as someone who left the game for quite a while and then came back, all that content was not free, and I was pretty annoyed that don't buy all those Living World episodes. That really pissed me off at the time.
Yeah.
But no, I completely see what you mean, though.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's like. Sorry, I was just gonna real quick. That's like a great tangent in that, like, Living World is a huge barrier for me to convince other people to play Guild Wars 2. I have to convince them, buy the game, and then I'm like, if you want to have this continuity between each expansion, you need to spend like another, I don't know how much it is now, like it must be $30 to $50 or something to get all of Living World. It's a lot, especially after I've just convinced someone to buy the expansions. But the content to tie between those expansions is like an extra big cost. I'm
going to be honest, another big barrier to entry for me to recommend the game is the personal story. I cannot recommend that to people. I don't think it's very good.
The core personal story, or like the expansions?
Level 1 to 80. Level 1 to 80 is a bad experience, in my opinion. I did it recently. I thoroughly didn't enjoy myself.
Well, it's very different. The story from 1 to 80 is so different when you jump into Heart of Thorns, or even in End of Dragons, like the new cinematic technology they have. It's just such a better experience, to start in the expansions almost. I mean, I did like the core, but yeah, I understand what you're saying and why someone might not like it as much.
I liked core in 2012. I liked it quite a lot back then. But now, having played all the most recent content, knowing how good the story gets, knowing how good the voice acting gets, knowing how good the set pieces get, and then your set piece is what you've got: Claw Island and Zaitan in the base game, and I can't recommend the Zaitan fight, not on good conscience.
I actually disagree with you, Brixel. I think
Whoa!
I really love the personal
Spicy.
story. I've done it
Seriously?
I think I've done it must have been like 3 times that I've done it all the way through with like new friends or whatever. And I think the interesting thing is that for me, the personal story, the campaign or whatever, is secondary to the actual leveling experience, which is the exploration and coming across. Every single time I've done this leveling experience from 1 to 80, I've come across events I have never seen in the game before. I've gone to places I've never been to, even after all these hours playing the game, because of the dynamic events system. Like, it's just so good. And I mean, like, I've played WoW and Final Fantasy 14 a lot. And recently, you know, I played through both the expansions. I played through Shadowlands and Endwalker. I hate to bash on them, but their questing is awful. Like, genuinely so bad. I hate the questing system in those games. Like, the actual content, like the story of the Final Fantasy 14 expansions is great, but their questing is like, I hate some of the worst in the genre. They have really bad quests. Guild Wars 2, at least, like there aren't crazy set pieces in the personal story, but the questing is at least you engaging in the combat, engaging in the world all the time, bouncing from zone to zone. It's a little bit directionless, but I think it's enough. And like in the context of Guild Wars 2, the vanilla personal story doesn't seem that great and fantastic, but compared to other MMOs in the genre, I think that the personal story is pretty okay. And a lot of people's new player experience that I see on Reddit and stuff when they've just jumped into the game, they're like, this game is fantastic. I love it. It's so fresh. So I don't know that it even, yeah, go ahead.
The beauty of it is, for me anyway, as someone who's not a big story-driven player, is you can level up in Guild Wars so many ways. Like, I think I've only done the core story on my main, and then if I level up another character, it's just through PvP or world exploration if I'm trying to 100% the map, or World v World. And I don't know, I love that. I think that's amazing that I don't have to do the MSQ every time, or whatever to get through it. So I don't know. That's just me.
I think going back to your previous comment, Bloom, about reward-driven gameplay, one of the primary rewards for me in video games, specifically MMOs, which is ironic because I came from WoW, but is story. I love an MMO with a good story, and that's really what keeps me going in these kinds of games. Like I finished Endwalker, and I haven't touched the game since then, to be honest.
Yes,
but
same.
but like having a good story is really what keeps me going. But then taking what I know about the story now and then looking at the personal story, it really frustrates me because it's just not on the same level. But on top of that, I have a massive issue with how they completely ruined the pacing of the story. And not through changing the story, but just through gating the story behind every 10 levels of gameplay. Because at release, correct me if I was wrong, you got a quest every 2 levels.
Yep.
As far as I remember.
And you could enter if you were lower.
Yeah.
There was no
you could breeze through.
You could make it. Yeah, you can make it as hard as you wanted by just, blasting through it, not doing side quests. You'd be under-leveled, but you could still do it. You could still enter, and you could take on the challenge if you wanted to. I think that was one of the worst changes they ever made to the new player experience.
Don't get it. I don't get why, because it's not just that yes, it's harder to farm for Black Lion keys now. Awesome. But it completely ruins the pacing of the story for me. I really enjoy getting that little bit every 2 levels rather than having to wait 10 levels, because that's just too much stick and not enough carrot.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And the other thing before, just one's like, real quick, is I just want to, real quick, I want to loop back to the idea that, we don't have the dungeons integrated into the story experience. And I think they tell a very important story for when you get to the final battle against Zaitan. That is the culmination of the dungeon stories, not really specifically your personal story. And
Right.
with Final Fantasy and WoW and stuff, while I didn't enjoy the actual questing of the main story, I was always pushing through because I was just looking forward to getting to the next dungeon. Because I wanted to do the next dungeon, I wanted to see what gear it gave. Guild Wars 2 has dungeons. They're just not integrated into the story. And if they were, you'd have like, you know, if you're a rewards-driven player, you'd have the carrot where you were like, okay, I can't wait to get the next dungeon and see what the dungeon gear set looks like. Exactly. This is the other thing, like the fancy dungeon gear sets, they're for level 80. They're not for the leveling players, and they're cool sets. They're in the game. Nobody's buying this gear with the dungeon tokens. You know, nobody at level 80 wants the dungeon gear for the actual stats. So that stuff should be the low-level player incentive for, you know, having fancy, unique cosmetic rewards and stuff. Yeah.
I think viewing the personal story how it is now is totally unfair to when it was released in 2012. And I just was pulling up old beta and alpha footage of the game. Like, they were working on this shit back in 2010, 2011. So in terms of like how it was for its time, like I remember reading on Reddit, someone was like, I really hate the cutscenes where the players are talking to each other on both sides, and there's just concept art in the background moving. Bleh, what is this? And I thought, this is the coolest thing
coolest shit ever.
I thought it was like amazing.
I loved it.
Yeah, that was cool.
And
I thought it was so clever.
I still like it to this day. I love going back, seeing like my my gear from End of Dragons in this cutscene. I'm like, oh wow, like it's back in 2012, but it looks so neat to see in this setting. I still like it to this day. So in terms of personal story, though, I think you're right, Bloom. Like, a lot of new players, they enjoy themselves, but I think there is this drop-off rate. Like, once you hit Claw Island, what you said, Brixel, like, what's next? You got the Claw Island moment, and then you got Zaitan. And then they're like, do you really make it all the way through? So I think, honestly, it could have been better, but at the end of the day, I enjoyed it for its time. Obviously, Season 1 was kind of hard to get through, especially if you weren't playing. And someone who doesn't play Destiny 2, like... I really enjoyed playing it at launch, but I know there's so much content now that has come and gone that I'm actually afraid to play the game. I'm like, what did I miss out on? Like, I feel like I'm just jumping into chapter 7 when I should have read the beginning of the book. So, props to ArenaNet, though, for doing something different, though, for Season 1. Like, they tried something, it didn't work. They're like, all right, we got to go back to what players are used to. And that's why it's more comfortable for players to jump in during the expansions, which is a bit of a bummer, but it's just kind of where players are at right now, I guess.
Yeah, and massive props to ArenaNet for like going back and now re-implementing Season 1 for free. I
think it's fantastic content. I really love it. Yeah. I've really loved Season 1 so far. I'm so happy it's back.
Yeah, right.
I think the place End of Dragons is so good, and they did it so right with the strikes integrated. You just wish kind of the whole experience could be like that. Yes.
Yes, I mean they've said that there's going to be a strike in the final episode of Season 1, which is a great step. But what I had written down for like what I would add is strikes for every major boss. Like it would be a huge thing for both new and returning players, knowing that there's an actual strike for Zaitan at the end. And I think, even veteran hardcore players, that's something to look forward to. It's a new piece of instance content. We've never had a Zaitan strike before, so that would be, brand new.
The Balthazar strike or something.
Yeah, Balthazar strike, Kraukatoric, like just I think every major expansion, every Living World season should have one final strike at the end of it for each one, just for some consistency. I think strikes are great. I think they're the way to move forward.
Would you have strike bosses for like story instance bosses, like Big Nose Ted or whatever his name is? Like, would you have strike bosses for like those story instances, or would it just be Season 1 or Season 2 kind of content?
Yeah, I mean, I've seen people list ideas, and people want, like when you fight the Eye of Zaitan and stuff like that, for that to be a strike. I think just in terms of getting their return on investment, and not, screwing around with every single little fight in the game. Just every major boss fight, just one for each, expansion or Living World season, just one at the end. There's always one big boss fight at the end of these anyway. Just turn it into a strike, please. Like this. Oh, yeah.
And give us some fun, like, expansion flavored gear to collect from them.
Yeah.
Stuff that's maybe not in the game yet. I don't know.
Yeah.
I want some more Mordermoth gear, to be honest.
Imagine Mordermoth fight, like the strike for
I think
what's
that would
it
be
called?
sick.
Yeah, the final boss fight with Mordermoth in the story, having a Mordermoth set that you can collect. Oh, I love it. That's the dream.
It would make me roll Sylvari for sure.
Yeah. I was disappointed. I got the Mordermoth variant for the Aurene Legendary Greatsword the other day, and none of the steps involved doing the final fight against like it has you do the
What?
Dragon's End fight, but not the story instance where you go into the mind. And I was
okay.
so excited to do that because they did an update for it where, like, if you die during the instance, you no longer get booted into like a little cage and watch your friends. You'll actually just respawn. And so I thought with that update that was going to be integrated into the Mordermoth variant. I was like, oh, we're going to have to do this again. And bonus points if they made you have to do the like migraine achievement for it. I would have loved that. But they didn't. It was just shocking to me. I wanted a reason to do that final story fight again.
Does everyone here have a legendary item in game, like a weapon or a gear set, or is there someone here that doesn't have one legendary item? I'm just curious.
I have some Gen 1 legendaries, but I haven't done any. I didn't do the Gen 2, and I haven't worked on any of the Gen 3 so far.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
I just honestly haven't seen one that I liked enough to go for it.
Fair.
Makes sense.
But like,
Yes.
I'm gonna go for Dragon's Weight though. I'm going for Dragon's
Oh
Weight.
yes, yeah. Big boy
It's
hammer.
Sick. And I play
Yeah.
Catalyst, and I have to pretend that I'm cool somehow because my DPS doesn't make me cool.
Yeah.
You gotta fake it till you make it, man. That's all you gotta do.
Yeah, I mean, speaking of like legendaries and stuff, in terms of like a carrot on the stick, I was disappointed that you don't have to do the Aurene legendaries. I thought they were going to be kind of the incentive for new players to have like this long tail progression at the end of Dragons, but they ask you to do again a lot of material farm, and none of it involves you doing the strikes from End of Dragons. None of it has you doing the meta events for End of Dragons. You might want to do the final meta event because it gives you an extra 1 antique summoning stone or whatever for I mean, I guess they've fixed it a little bit in that now like strike challenge modes give you antique summoning stones. For you guys that don't have them, basically the legendary Aurene weapons require 100 of these things called antique summoning stones, and you can only buy 5 per week from a vendor in Arborstone, or you get 1 for doing the final meta event, and you also get 1 for each strike challenge mode. So they've integrated that a bit more, but I wish that the material farm and that sort of stuff just wasn't there. I wish legendaries were like, do a set of, do all this content, all this new content, like for the legendary Aurene weapons, I had to go back and do a lot of like old stuff just to farm this gold. And I wish it was just fully all in on End of Dragons. All the things you got to do to get these Aurene legendaries were all just involving End of Dragons maps and End of Dragons content. And that's it. Because that, I think, is supposed to be the carrot on the stick for, players finishing End of Dragons.
So, go ahead, Tom.
Okay, I was just going to say, that is kind of ArenaNet's, the tough thing about ArenaNet, right? The thing that makes Guild Wars great is also its curse. Like a player like me coming back who's very casual, and a lot of the casual players, it doesn't bother me that legendaries might be hard or locked behind strikes, but ArenaNet in a way doesn't want to lock hard things behind hard content because they know much of their player base is very casual, and that's kind of been their philosophy for a long time. And so, but that also means that you're not going to get a lot of new players into that hard content because, like you said, there's not a reward there that is really pushing players to do that. And so I think they're in a tough spot with, they've almost backed themselves into a corner with the way they make content and how they reward content. And not just that they casual or, cater to casual players. I think 80% of MMO players are casual. It's not like, that's just the reality of MMOs. But they have made it so easy for players to jump in and jump out and do open world content and story missions. And so I understand what you're saying. It hinders people getting into that harder content because that's never going to drop a piece of gear, for example. It'll drop 2 gold in the currency you need to get something else. So
yeah. I mean, Final Fantasy and WoW at this point, I think, like retail WoW, I think they are also kind of like pretty casual games. The audience, I agree, is like 80%, 90% casual players. They know this, and even then, they still do raids and dungeons, and they force players to go through that stuff, and the players are fine with it. I've never really heard anyone go through Final Fantasy 14 and they're a casual player and they're complaining that they've got to do dungeons or raids to progress the story or whatever.
I actually have a friend. He's a hardcore Guild Wars 2 player, and his least favorite part of Final Fantasy is that he has to do dungeons with people.
Really?
Oh wow. Okay.
Which it just blows my mind.
Interesting.
Because that's what I think.
Love you guys.
That's what I think. I mean, that's what I think ArenaNet thinks their player base is like these players that are casual and they don't want to engage in group content. They don't want any toxicity, that sort of thing. But I think they would be surprised if they opened the floodgates and had matchmaking for this stuff. Because the content isn't that, it's not brutal. Like the normal mode strikes are not that hard. I guess the last 2 might be, but I don't know. I think they underestimate their audience a lot. I think just because it's a casual game, it doesn't mean that the quote unquote hardcore instant stuff should be totally optional. I don't know. Yeah.
I think one issue though kind of comes down to perception of this content, which is that, well, if you don't have to do this content, it's probably because it's not for you. It's probably just for those hardcore players. My roommate, for example, he didn't know that you could play end game content for Guild Wars 2. He logged for every Living World expansion or episode and then logs off until the next bit of story. He's never touched any endgame system just because he thought it wasn't for him.
Yeah, I'm the same. I've got friends that have like triple the amount of hours. They've got legendaries. They're loaded with gold. And I'm like, have you done raids before? And they're like, no. And I'm like, oh my God, you're missing out on like this whole like section of Guild Wars 2. Yeah, exactly. And it blows my mind. ArenaNet has like developed this content. They've put money into it. And they don't. And now they've, stopped doing raids and they've moved over to strikes because there was such low retention. And I'm like, well, of course there is. You're not like giving people incentive to go do it. And it is genuinely good content. I think Guild Wars 2's raids are like some of the best in the genre. I think they're super well designed, especially given how many tools we have in Guild Wars 2 to, deal with encounters. We've got portals, invis. We've got chronomancers avoiding damage through time distortion and that sort of stuff. We've got so many cool mechanics in the game that they've designed raids around. Yeah. And so as a result, they're really fun content. They're really easy to do with, pickup groups. I always equate them to like Destiny raids. They're this difficulty where it's not too hard for anyone to do, but like kind of just hard enough that you need to have, specific roles to each player and have a bit of accountability. But I think that's a good point. And that so many friends that are really heavy into the, gaming landscape, they have no idea that Guild Wars 2 has raids and strikes at this point, which is mind-boggling to me. But it's kind of the fault of ArenaNet not advertising that stuff. I saw basically no ads for the strikes in End of Dragons, or
no ads for End of Dragons.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I think their marketing game actually they stepped it up quite a bit with End of Dragons. Agreed. They did kind of a good job. but they didn't advertise that instance content. And even with like Path of Fire, I've never done the raids that were attached to Path of Fire because I just never realized they came out. I was playing like Final Fantasy or something at the time, and I had no idea that there were raids coming out for Path of Fire until later. And I think if I was, back to your point, like if I was chief executive and I had to like come up with some marketing decisions, it's like I would advertise that instance content because even though it's not specifically for casual players, that draws people into MMOs, I think.
Well, I saw the recent video with like Limit Maximum and Teapot, and he was like, the world first WoW raider was like really excited about the Guild Wars instance content. So you're right, it is really good, and I think they could cater to a lot of those players in other games for sure.
Yeah, they did not advertise those challenge modes at all. Like Harvest Temple challenge mode is some of the best content the game's ever had. It's the hardest. It would appeal to a lot of people that play Final Fantasy and WoW. There was not a single trailer or like Twitter post or anything. It was in a patch note. We've added Harvest Temple challenge mode. I'm like, no one's gonna see this. Everyone outside the Guild Wars 2 sphere is never gonna see this. They don't even know what a challenge mode is. They haven't even explained in a video or something what a challenge mode is.
It's quite interesting how you stated that when it comes to Guild Wars 2, there's a lot of players, even friends of ours that have played the game. They're like, we had no idea there was like end game content to play. And some of the most viewed Guild Wars 2 videos is like, what do I do after level 80? Like these like kind of like walkthroughs and pointers of like what to do in the game. So I feel like if I was in this position of like chief executive officer, I would be paying other content creators to try the game. Like what we saw, there was an ex-WoW player who was like, oh man, I want to play this like Harvest Temple challenge mode. Like this would be sick to try. If I had all the money in the world, I would probably pay Asmongold to play the game for like 3 hours. And I feel like the player base would like quadruple overnight. Like just getting some big MMO RPG player, whether they're from Final Fantasy, WoW, what's the other one? I don't know, Black Desert, Star Wars, like any of these other MMOs, just to try and just make content. Even if it's just them playing it and giving their honest opinion, I feel like, yeah, you can pay for good commercials and Twitch streams from the developers, but I think if you have content from content creators, people are going to watch that. They're going to check it out. So that's what I would decide if I was in that position.
It's a tricky situation because they actually did that. I think they paid Limit Maximum to play Guild Wars 2 a lot, like maybe last year, midway through last year. And he played it for a couple days and he was just doing like the early game experience and PvP. And then as soon as the sponsorship ended, he dropped it, never played again. And it was like great. I was watching those streams every day. It had like loads of views, loads of people interested in Guild Wars. It was good, but he never stuck with it. And same with like Summit, I think, played Guild Wars 2 for a period of time. And Moist Critical on YouTube.
Yeah.
Like he did a Guild Wars 2 video.
Stay Safe was on for a while.
Stay Safe as well. All these huge content creators did Guild Wars 2 videos. And I was like, yes, now's the time for Guild Wars 2. But then they never got to the good stuff to like get them hooked. They never got to, End of Dragons after playing through the whole personal story. They never did that sort of Asmongold thing of playing through the entire content, doing all the instance content as it came up. This is the stuff I think they need to push. Even those like sponsored streamers and stuff, I think they didn't know that there was raids and strikes and stuff waiting for them at the end.
You were saying about that Teapot and Maximum interview. I can't and like he was fascinated by the content. Like he was, I loved that interview just because he was. It was like watching this kid who doesn't know what fast cars sound like, and he hears a fast car for the first time, and he's like, "Whoa, really? That's awesome!" Because like, but the guy's played the game, as you said. He's played the game, so why didn't the game show him that?
Yeah,
and I was kind of hoping that the new open world bosses, the redesigned low-level open world bosses, would have a little bit more of that, but they just have a shockwave added. and new skins, and it's not going to show any low-level players what it's like to play endgame group content, because it's just a slideshow that if you're lucky you might get a shot off on it before it dies.
Yeah. I understand it's like low-level content, you know. It's like they don't want it to be too difficult. They don't want it to like obliterate these new players.
Obliterate those new players. Nuke those new players.
Yeah, I mean, I have kind of a similar opinion. I'm like, people should fail. People should know what it's like and then adjust their builds. Yeah. You know what? Dungeons are hard. They're actually really hard.
Yeah, they are.
I've played them with friends, and we're like experienced players, and like 4 of us together. We got like one man down, so it's 4 of us. We're all level 80s, and I mean, we've been sort of like handheld through the dungeons by other experienced players. We've never done them just by ourselves before to figure it out. They're hard. They're really hard, and if you had to do them, you would figure out your build very quickly. You'd be like, wow, this is not working. Whatever I'm doing is not working.
I hate to end the podcast here, but we do have to wrap up soon. So I think a good way to end the podcast is, since this is Hydrated Gamers podcast, I, for one, am a huge fan of drinking water. I'm actually... I haven't drinking caffeine in, I think, several months or so. I think the last time I did was like September or so. I'm a huge water drinker fan, so I think a good way to end the podcast is stating your favorite beverage. So yeah, I'm a huge water fan. I love like sparkling water. Is like mineral water is like my favorite thing to drink. But I think we can go through that and where you can find our content as well. My username moopliss. You can check out my content. I do have an upcoming video about cut content in the game that ArenaNet could add. So, hint, hint, worth watching ArenaNet. But yeah, I think this is a good question to end the stream on. And yeah.
Cool. Who do you want to start with? I'll start. I'll go ahead.
Go for it.
My favorite beverage is ginger beer. I love ginger beer. Yeah, it's good stuff. I am Bloom. You can find me on YouTube and Twitter under Bloom. If you have trouble finding it on YouTube, then just type Bloom Guild Wars 2, because apparently there's a lot of channels named Bloom on YouTube. So I'm thinking of changing it at some point, but I don't know. Anyway, that's me. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, my favorite is probably coffee. At the moment, keeps me going with the 4 kiddos running around here. So you can find us BadCuzDad on YouTube and Twitter. And yeah, man, just thanks for having us on the show. Love Guild Wars. Just holding out for some more PvP content soon. Hopefully they come through. So for sure,
you're in my thoughts and prayers. I also want more PvP content. You know, I love the PvP. I think Guild Wars 2 has excellent PvP, and they should lean into that as well. You know.
My turn. I would say my favorite beverage is probably this is dope soda thing they have in France called Orangina, which is like carbonated orange juice. It goes hard. That's my favorite. Yeah.
Nice.
Yes,
but
nice.
but you don't get it here. You can find me on YouTube at Brixel. You can find me on Twitch at Brixel Gaming. You can find me on YouTube at Brixel YT. I got a video coming out tomorrow. Last week in Tyria. Guild Wars 2 news. We can all complain about the new Jadebot skins together.
Yeah.
Nice. Guys, it was a pleasure having you on. Thank you very much for being a part of the first episode of Hydrated Gamers. Apologies for any sound issues. Thank you, crew, for joining us in chat. It's nice to see you on board. Who knows? Maybe you'll be in a future episode. Until then, everyone, again, special thanks for making time in your schedule to be here for the podcast. And
thank you
to
for
see you guys
making
again.
This happen.
Of course.
Yeah, thank you for making it happen. Thank you for making it
sure.
at 8 a.m. instead of 3 a.m. like the other Guild Wars 2 podcasts I've been on. This is a reasonable time. I feel good. I can start my day and not be exhausted.
I'm about to go to bed. It's 1:30 for me.
You suckers.
We have audio confirmation that Bloom can do podcasts at 3 a.m., guys. All right.
Oh, God. Not
I heard
again.
it. You heard it.
Guys, thank you again. Have a great night, great morning, or great afternoon, as for Tom. And yeah, I'll see you guys later. Bye-bye.
Likewise.
Everybody.
Stay hydrated.
Stay hydrated.